Bigger than Capes.
Give me some
Oh, yeah. I was looking forward to it, and then I watched it.
Oh, right.
Hello and welcome to Bigger Than Capes. This week it is something of a smaller episode. It's just the two of us, myself, Matt, and Will.
How do?
And this week we are going to be talking about the manga Chainsaw Man.
Absolutely.
I've been trying to bully someone on the pod to read it forever.
Took the bait.
Yeah, I mean, I'm proud of you. It's getting an anime this year. I think they've said it's going to be October. I think this year. And I thought, why not try and do like a primer, a sort of like, a thing to kind of tell you why you should give it a go. It's incredibly popular, and it's like been a bit of a breakout. But if our opinions mean anything to you, which they shouldn't, especially not us two, then if what we say today gets you interested, then go and pick it up and get ready for what's undoubtedly going to be I'm fairly sure is going to be a pretty standout anime adaptation. Like, it's being handled by Studio Mappa, who are pretty darn good. Like, they did the Dororo adaptation a few years ago, which I quite liked. I mean, for everyone else who cares, they did they did and are still doing the Jujutsu Kaisen adaptation.
Awesome.
Like some big shows.
Yeah, I'm just looking through their Wikipedia, and there's loads of stuff on there, including the final season, part 2 of Attack on Titan.
Yes. I think they did a couple series I really like as well. I think they did one of the later seasons of Hajime no Ippo.
They did Hajime no Ippo Rising.
Yes, and a series that from last year that I really enjoyed called The Adartan Deities Know Only Peace, which is incredibly gross and violent, given the title, and that's that proved some of their weird gore chops, which may be very important for Chainsaw Man. So
yeah, it's going to translate quite specifically to Chainsaw Man.
Yeah, so Will, if I'd asked you before, I should have asked you this before I got you to read it, just from like the title. What do you think? What would you have said Chainsaw Man? It sounded like it was going to be about.
Well, I had seen some of the sort of initial images and designs, so I saw his chainsaw face, and that led me down a certain path. Knowing that it was a shonen and having at least a little bit of experience with some other shonens, I had certain kind of maybe misplaced expectations of various sort of arena fights, and I mean, the fact that he's Chainsaw Man leads it down the idea of a superhero-ish route, maybe a My Hero Academia, but for big boys and girls, with more guts and the like. And in some ways it is. In some ways it is an anime that kind of skirts the normal tropes as far as I understand them. And I must say, I come from a position of a like anime and manga amateur.
Yes.
I've got a bit of breadth to my knowledge now, but it's not, there'll be people out there who will sneer at my meager
No,
knowledge. But so yeah, I think that was my impression going in. I really liked the design.
Yeah.
The chainsaw head, which sort of is designed to look like not just a chainsaw in its blade, but in its engine component as well. The way that the blades in his arms kind of intersect his fingers, I don't know why, but that I just find that a very satisfying design choice.
it's very much almost like the hidden blade.
Yeah,
like Assassin's Creed.
absolutely.
Now, I was hoping you were going to say I'd assumed it was about a man made of chainsaws, because you would have been correct.
That is the right
because
answer.
that is a way of. I mean, that's one way of almost perfectly summarizing it. But it's also much more than that. And like you say, like the artwork is fantastic. We forgot to say who it's by as well. It's by Tatsuki Fujimoto, who also did a previous like excellent manga in about 2016 called Fire Punch, which is also gross and violent and philosophical and depressing, and did a very, very good manga like one shot this year or end of last year, called Look Back, all about like the process of making manga, which is it's like I think it's about 100 pages. Very, very good.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it really is. But yeah, his design work, like you say, it's not quite kind of what you expect, but it sums it manages to encapsulate like our main character Denji is is the titular Chainsaw Man. And his design when he's in his Chainsaw Man form is like so perfectly captures this unusual pairing of words. Like you say, his head becomes like the body, like the motor housing. Yeah. And like still manages to break in two, like where there'd be a seam, so he can have these horrifying needle teeth. He has like the two handles attached to his head. Just where his heart is a ripcord.
Oh yeah. Rev himself up.
Yeah, it's absolutely brilliant, and like all of these like hybrid demon forms are similarly good. There are some later on in the manga which are pretty incredible, and I won't spoil what they are exactly. But they have the same sort of brilliant like thought put into how to create something that entirely kind of encapsulates these two things.
I think it helps to note like the world is made up of these various devils.
Yes.
That just seem to be made out of everyday things.
Like
I think the first thing he kills is a tomato devil, and there's a cucumber devil.
Sea cucumber.
Yeah, which meets a particularly hilarious end.
Yeah, there's like zombie devils and everything, and
of all different types of things. I like that at least where I'm up to, it's kept its cards close to its chest on how and why these things kind of specifically come about. Yeah,
but it's like it is clever in the sense of like they're all sort of based on like their power comes from how much human society fears them. So you can kind of look at a demon's name and kind of go, oh, this is going to be a really good fight, because its name is like X, like is like X demon, and it's like, oh, we're really scared of X.
Yeah.
Or like it's the sea cucumber demon. It's like, well, we're not really scared of sea cucumbers in the sense of like we don't think as a society that we're going to be killed by sea cucumbers.
But there must be enough fear out there to
manifest.
generate the devil.
Yeah. Yeah, like, so the whole point of this, like I say, is like about talking less about like specific plot beats. We'll talk about some early stuff, just like, but you can kind of not have to worry too much about spoilers in this. We want to talk about tone and just what's cool. And chainsaws are pretty cool. Like,
Kids love chainsaws.
kids love chainsaws. Yeah, like Denji's. So like let's go sort of to the start of it. Like Denji is like Denji is a child in the most terrible poverty I've ever seen.
Yeah, I mean he is at the lowest possible ebb you could find him at when the story opens.
Yeah, it's like
I think
he's born to debt.
Yeah,
His dad kills himself, and he is given he's given the entirety of his dad's debt by Yakuza boss.
Yeah,
and it goes from there, and he's basically like never knows what it is to be actually human. Like
No.
he's never allowed to be a human. Like he is always, all he is this debt, and that's either in the sense of working to pay it off or just the various parts of him. He sold off one of his kidneys, one of his eyes, and one of his testicles.
yeah.
All of these things to just keep surviving. And
Yeah, and he's eating just plain bread occasionally when he can.
but he does have one very good thing. Who is a dog, who is a demon, who is a chainsaw.
Is it Pochita?
Pochita, yeah.
Is an absolutely adorable design. It
It's
just looks like
so cool.
a little sausage with legs and a chainsaw for a face.
That splits down its cleft.
Yeah, like a
its
little.
its palate. It cleaves its palate.
Like,
It's so wonderful. Like, it's no wonder they made like a plushie of it.
yeah, it's a trope that I'm always on board for. The kind of the adorable sidekick or little character gets me every time.
Yeah, I'm a chump. I always fall for it. If there's something that has, there's something that's going to get me, it's going to be the weird, cute little thing.
Yeah,
So, yeah, and, well, especially when it's contrasted against all of the violence going on around it. But like, I love how early on, before Denji and Pochita like fuse, you see him using Pochita as a chainsaw several times.
yeah,
And like using him to chop wood, and kill the tomato devil. Like, it's very like, it's so strange how much kind of like comedy it manages to get out of this very horrible situation. Like, there's a real, like, really excellent like balance there, like, where it's incredibly bleak and terrible, but that kind of escalates the comedy, I suppose, because it makes you awkward with kind of how you're laughing, and makes you question it occasionally, going, oh god, I really shouldn't be laughing. And there's kind of a pleasure in that kind of guilt.
No, definitely, I agree. I think, as you mentioned earlier, like he's never really had anything approaching a normal life, and it makes his motivations incredibly simple.
Yeah,
And I
like
think that makes for quite an interesting kind of
He's-
viewpoint.
his whole story in so many ways is like about both giving up his humanity, like discovering his humanity, and whilst at the same time never having had it. Like it's a thing that he has sacrificed whilst never having known, only to then find it, but maybe not be a person who can enjoy it. And the fact that he was never, he was never really raised to be a person, means that he never has, like, he has the ability to live in the present in a way that most people don't, in the sense that, like, when he's given various, like, when he's given these simple things that everyone else would take for granted, he's able to enjoy them in a way that, like, you or I never could.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then is like, when it's anything that requires even more than a moment's kind of thinking about, he's unsure of whether he can really even comprehend them, whether he can, because he's never been socialized properly.
He's lived his entire life essentially on his own, and so many simple things, but I definitely find that really quite refreshing. It's not like a typical revenge story. It's not one filled of the classic responsibility or any of that sort of stuff. Like, his motivations are quite selfish, but also in context it's really understandable why.
Absolutely. Like,
why his aims are so limited. It helps upend something that I sometimes feel a little bit uncomfortable with in manga and an anime, is that it has some of that I dare say, like, a bit typical male gaze sexuality and to it, but because of the context of who he is, and like as just a sort of a teenage boy who has had no social interaction, I feel it plays it out in a tongue-in-cheek way. It's aware of what it's doing.
And it always makes the realization right after the thing has happened that kind of has that gaze that it wasn't a good thing.
He's unsatisfied, and
he realizes that it and kind of it forces the reader to kind of make the same,
also question their own voyeurism, perhaps.
Like it's
it kind of upends a trope that sometimes is I struggle with, I guess.
I get that. Like, I love Berserk, and Berserk avoids a number of problems, but has a ton of its own in that regard.
It's not something to write it off completely, is it? It's just, but I take note.
No, but it's interesting how it approaches those things, like those topics, and the lens through which, like, our characters interact with them. Like the what I will say is, like, kind of like Denji's main goal for a good portion of what you've read would be simply to touch boobs. He is Denji is a really interesting main character insofar as the story acknowledges that he probably isn't a good person.
No.
But at the same time, it kind of never says that he is a bad person.
No,
in regard, because he's a person who it's hard to cast a judgment on.
Yeah, he's doing everything he thinks he needs to just to survive, and that's all he's known. Like he's sympathetic even when he's being
Yeah.
a bit of
Like-
a bit of a dick.
And every time he does something good, there is almost always right away something similarly, like to a similar level, that is at best morally grey.
Yeah,
Take for example when he throws the car.
yeah.
He saves a lady in a department, like in an office building, only to then like throw a car that has a person in it at a devil.
while declaring he cares little about the person in the car.
Yeah, like he has a very, like we say, like a very sort of personal morality, and his morality kind of with regards to other people is in direct sort of correlation to how well he knows them.
Hmm.
But yeah, the whole story sort of develops into Denji is killed and revives thanks to a pact that he made with Pochita to show Pochita his dreams and to allow him to live them with Denji. Upon his death, he is reborn as the Chainsaw Man, a hybrid human devil that has not been seen before, and he is shortly after kind of taken in by the public security devil hunters, led by Makima, a lady who takes Denji as her pet, her pet dog. Makima is a really interesting character, and again is a very much a shades of grey character, in that she is clearly incredibly devoted to protecting the public and saving people from devils, and
We'll definitely do some potentially shady things to
some absolutely terrible things.
achieve that goal.
And as we said, like Denji is literally a pet to her.
Yeah. Well, like you say, as a hybrid devil, he's essentially got no human rights.
Anymore. Like, he can be destroyed, and kind of this is where the book really begins. After its first chapter, with Denji becoming the Chainsaw Man, it kind of goes on to be about Denji's work with the public, with the public devil hunters, and the team that he works with. I will say now that there is it's a series that, to put it nicely, has a lot of turnover.
Yeah.
It's and that's very much textual as well. Like, it's acknowledged in the series, like, being a devil hunter, particularly for the public security division, is not good. It is a job that has an incredibly high mortality rate. There are civilian devil hunters, like people who are just like day-to-day citizens who just take it upon themselves to go out and kill devils. And as soon as they can't handle it, it goes up the chain to the public security. And what's special about the public security is that they are people who are allowed to make pacts with devils. In fact, a number of them are encouraged to do it, and this can be sort of any demon that can be reasoned with is kind of open to creating a pact. This can be like a demon allowing a devil allowing you to use a body part of it, or like giving you a special sort of power. And so, like, yeah, as soon as it's too dangerous, it goes to them, and that's why so many of them die. So many.
It's within that element as well. I think something that I often find manga does better than its Western counterpart. Often, particularly in the superhero-ish genre, I'd hasten to call this superhero specifically.
Yeah.
But is like weird and interesting powers that the gifts that they're granted by these devils are not straightforward. And I think from like One Punch Man and My Hero Academia, people just have very specific and bizarre powers. And the things that they get in this are no different. Like, they are unusual in the way that they're used. That sometimes means there's like limitations to the power as well.
With Chainsaw Man, what I find different to other manga with characters with such like often limited and specific powers, is that it's not quite one of these series that is about like specific clever application all the time. Occasionally it seems like it's going to be like that you're going to have like yes, I have to stay like 5 moves ahead of my opponent now and keep my powers, like, you know, and figure out exactly what their powers can do, so that I can lead them into a trap. And often it's like there are powers like that in here, and like everyone is very careful about like not revealing what devils they've contracted with, so that you can't figure out exactly what they can do. Like we don't, you know, like you don't know what Makima is contracted with, do you?
No.
And like another one of the characters, like Aki, is partnered with like partnered with the Fox Devil, and stuff like, and occasionally it's like, okay, so we know that he can use the Fox Devil's like head and stuff like, and that means it can eat things and stuff. It's like, okay, how is he going to apply that cleverly? And it's like, no, he just made it eat the person. And like, so sometimes it's clever, but a lot of the time it's just like, no, let's just keep pushing this further and further. Like, we've got these people who have specific cool powers and they'll do specific and cool things, but then at the same time we've also got a man whose body is made of chainsaws, and that's a thing where you just want to see people cut up in weird ways like that you'd never really thought of before. Like, it's, you know, it can do both, and that's something pretty special. Like the level of like a constant escalation of violence is great. And the like I mean, to be fair, it's not all violence and fights. Like we were saying, there's a lot in here about philosophy and about sort of the nature of humanity and stuff like. But also, man who chainsaw.
Yeah, but I mean, there are several chapters where Denji doesn't become Chainsaw Man, and there are several chapters where there are no kind of action at all. It takes its background characters and stories like quite seriously.
Absolutely. No matter how long a character is going to be there.
Yeah, it at least makes them feel relevant at that moment in the story.
Yes.
They're important. It's important that they're there. I think, like a lot of shonen that I've read, it seems to kind of change what it is slightly after a period of time.
Yeah, it's great.
And I think it's a funny thing when you're trying to introduce people to this sort of medium, because I think to know what something is, you sort of have to read maybe 10 to 15 chapters of it.
Yeah.
To know where it goes. But there's a point in this about that marker. I think about the chapter 14 to about chapter 18 or so. I'm just going to call it the event in the hotel, and the kind of the core conceit about that idea.
It shifts entirely in that.
It's just a very, very cool conceit. Like, I think it's one of those where it's done so well visually as well. The way it's shown, specifically what's going on. I'm cautious not to really say anything.
Yes, but it's so fast.
Yeah,
it's over so many locations,
and the way it uses the page in certain aspects to like it indicate what the powers are of this devil. And
there are some very so there's a bit. It's up to where it's during where you've read up to, where a specific character uses a contract with a devil they have that's not the main devil that we know about, and we see a hand start to come in from off page. It's literally appears in the margin and gets bigger. As a countdown goes down across panels. It's and the 2-page spreads in this are just like, whenever a climactic blow is dealt, you get the most incredible of them. And we should also say that the fact that most of the characters who aren't explicitly just humans have the ability to regenerate. So the level of violence that's able to happen to people is brilliant. It's so clever that it's such a clever addition to it. Is all they need to do is drink some blood, and they'll be right back up with it. And just we see Denji get both of his arms cut off, get cut in half. Shot in the head.
Stabbed in the head.
Stabbed through the brain. It's having his neck broken. All of these things, and he can be right back going. And it's also it's very funny. It's not afraid to use its violence for humor, in the sense of just because it can be cartoony. And because we know that in most situations Denji is going to be okay, we can kind of laugh at how over the top.
Absolutely. It's got that. I mean, it's not like this, but it has that sense of Tarantino violence where it is so exaggerated that it becomes.
I almost was talking. I almost said the words squash and stretch, the old terms for in animation when you have the rubber hosing and stuff, and about how models work. But then I remembered what happens to certain characters around the event that we were talking about earlier that involved squashing and stretching.
Oh yeah.
And it felt less
less clean about that.
And it is a crude book. It is a super horny book, but again, it's very character driven. It is all the series is all the other characters have motivations and have real sort of development and
We haven't really mentioned the best
movements,
character.
but let me guess who you're going to say, because I think they are probably my favorite as well, which is Power.
It is Power.
Yeah, so describe Power.
So Power is a fiend,
Yeah.
and if I remember rightly, is somewhere between like a full devil.
So a fiend is a devil that's taken possession of a dead human.
Right,
is
okay.
Different to being a hybrid somehow.
Somehow, yeah, they're not the same thing.
But it's basically like Denji has his personality, has his original sort of personality, and a fiend is controlled by the devil.
Yeah, the husk is just that. Apart from the fact that she has little horns on the top of her head,
And big old fangs.
and big old fangs, and is entirely unreliable, and cocky and arrogant and obsessed with food.
Yeah.
And where a lot of the humor came from me, just her being so oblivious to like a lot of the horror and chaos going around her, or maybe not oblivious, but just doesn't care.
And just blunt and constantly lying, and like there's so many just incredible lines. There's a great part where she is out for drinks and food with everyone, and they're all going, wow, like how do you manage, like it's so weird that you aren't just wanting desperately to kill us the entire time, and you're actually having, for a fiend, a relatively normal social interaction with us. And she goes, oh, it's because my IQ is so high. And it's like, what? And it's like, and she's like, yeah, it's over 100. It's like 100. And it's like, oh, that's not that great. And it's like, I think, and I think mine's like 120. And it's like, oh yeah, no, that's what I meant. And you know, like mine, I think mine was 136. Well, mine's definitely 500 or maybe 1,000. And she occasionally will say like these and thys and thous, and like let battle be joined type stuff, whilst at the rest of the time just being incredibly just weird, abrupt, and like she's a little goblin.
And she has very cool powers as well, though, with her like blood
manipulation and making hammers and swords out of blood,
and that's used in a few like quite interesting ways. I suppose just beyond where we're kind of talking up to today. There's a bit with like their new trainer.
Yes.
And the way that her blood is used.
They start
is
to.
Cool.
That's when it starts to do some of the like clever fighting. Like there's clever fighting kind of before that, but a lot of the time it's some of it before then is about like is stuff like, well, Denji's main limitation is that the chainsaw, like him running his chainsaws and not dying, requires him to constantly get blood.
Mm-hmm. So he loses.
So he has to figure out his, how to work around this limitation. Yeah, sorry, go on.
I was just going to make the point, like he loses his own blood, doesn't he? For it,
the
chainsaw's literally cutting him. And
so like they have to figure out kind of, that's the limitation that they're trying to work around, or like Power, like burns through her own blood very quickly, like, so they've got to think about that. Like there's a lot of limitation being I need blood, but it's like it gets sort of clever and thinks about how to apply these powers more as it goes on. Like Denji starts to do some quite cool things. A little later, like Power does some cool things, like Aki gets some interesting new powers, and like it's interesting to kind of look at what people give up for their contracts. Like everyone who makes a contract, has to give the devil something. Like you said, that could be an eye, that could be like your sense of taste,
Yeah, it can be all sorts of different concepts at the
anything,
length
and
of your
it's-
life.
and it's supposed to depend upon how much the devil likes you, how much it sort of thinks, how much enjoyment it thinks it'll get from that thing,
Mhm.
and often how much you're willing to give. Like if you're willing to give more or less than it's asking, well, sorry, like more than it's asking, I suppose, you might get more from it. Like I was saying, there's like there's a character who has the ability to control, like to always have the ability to control like a specific limb of a devil, like at any time.
Yeah, I
Um,
like that concept that you based on what you barter, you'll get like, well, I'll let you use my arm,
Mm.
or just you don't summon a whole devil or a whole array of powers.
yes, and like it's always linked to their concept.
Yeah,
And it's just it's weirdly clever occasionally, and you're just like, oh, this manga, like you say, about a man who is chainsaws, is really smart as well occasionally, and like will just do a thing and surprise you. And it's that contrast.
Mhm.
It's always happy to contrast what like to give contrast and to surprise you. It loves surprising you. I honestly think like it's one of the best shonen I've read in many years. Like I don't get me wrong, like I've enjoyed a fair few modern like shonen. I enjoyed Jujutsu Kaisen. I enjoyed like Demon Slayer, as I've documented on the podcast.
yeah.
I finally got into One Piece over the last like couple years and stuff. But the Chainsaw Man knows how it, like I feel like it knew how it was going to end from the very start. It's such a short run.
Mhm.
It's like this. It's supposed to be coming back at a later point, but it's currently, as it stands, 93 chapters. Sorry, 97 chapters. 97 chapters.
7. I don't mind getting things in that kind of season format where
Yeah, especially if it actually uses them for a real demarcation point. If it goes like, here's where this story ended, and now
that's
we
it.
want to tackle something else.
Yeah, and you can afford to wait until you've got a good idea. You're not publishing just for the sake of hitting a deadline. You're like, go away, think about it, come back, make it real good. I wanted to mention just about the art in it, 'cause we talked a lot about the kind of character design and stuff. But I think the designs, particularly of like buildings and cities, and within that, the destruction of said buildings, is where I think the art really shines. Like as you mentioned with Aki's Fox
when
Devil.
it just bites into the restaurant.
And it's bursting out the top of this building, and there are like air conditioning units and bricks and bits of window frame, and it's just such a stunning page of really great detail, and you just feel the motion of it. There are some other really clever bits where he uses kind of panel repetition in a way that I kind of think is more common in Western comics, but where you'll see kind of a set of panels, and then on a following page it'll be that panels again, but something's changed. For instance, there's a bit where some people get assassinated by guns, and you kind of see them all being set up in their locations, and then you see those locations again, but this time all the people around them are suddenly packing.
Yeah.
And I think it uses just really like clever and satisfying storytelling beats in the art.
Absolutely. And yeah, and it also like we were saying about guns and stuff, it puts a good sort of amount of thought into like things like the kind of like it's Japan, so you don't really expect to see guns
Hmm.
anyway. But like, there's a good amount of thought into sort of like, well, why aren't they using guns more? Why do we not see like these devil hunters with guns and stuff? And it's not
Yeah.
like a case of like guns are ineffective, they're like terrible to use against them. There's like real thought put into it, and like sort of like, well, yeah, if guns become linked with devil encounters, and like the sheer sort of like, if you're reminded every day about like guns and the power of guns, well, that's going to be a problem, isn't it?
That's it, as you said. It's sort of generated by mass fear, and yeah, a lot more guns means more scared.
Exactly. Like the more gun, like exactly. Like it's
Just
they're
like the more sea cucumbers, the more scared.
exactly. The more people think about sea cucumbers and are scared of them, the more powerful the sea cucumber devil will be upon their return.
Prediction. That's the final antagonist of the whole story. It's all been about that sea cucumber the whole time.
Yeah. So yeah, like I hope that kind of we've managed to put across some of what we thought made Chainsaw Man great. Like, I read and have read a lot of manga, like probably the most of anyone on the podcast. Zach would probably be like the only one who's anywhere near sort of close on it.
Mm-hmm.
But like I say, it's when it came out in 2018, it was really refreshing. And I think it still has that power now. Like, if you want, like, I guess the kind of easiest comparison to a super popular other sort of shonen manga would be Jujutsu Kaisen, which, like, they're both about people fighting like devils, or in Jujutsu Kaisen's case, like curses that are all tied to people's sort of fears, and there are contracts and such and powers. But I prefer Chainsaw Man, like, in a number of ways. Like, I really like Jujutsu Kaisen, but like it has there's a real sort of similarity in some ways, but it almost feels weird often to describe Chainsaw Man as a shonen. It's very like childish in a bunch of ways, and kind of extreme in a bunch of ways.
Yeah.
But I almost feel it more as like a seinen, which is like an adult manga, like. But
I think that's fair.
But again, that's just because, like, that's just kind of because it goes there with regards to like it with the way it talks about sex, and the way like it talks about violence and stuff. Like, a lot of shonen like Jujutsu Kaisen are there and ready to talk about like death and violence and stuff, but Chainsaw Man's depictions of like sex and acknowledgement of the kind of desire that is there in a lot of young people, and it's and they can't kind of discuss like Denji's 16-year-old
He
guy,
thinks.
and he's struggling with these things, and it's great to see that kind of addressed in this way in something like this, and to kind of to be willing to say like that it's how kind of unhealthy the way that kind of like it is, isn't like how everything that we see about Denji he has to learn and be taught and stuff, and it's great. Also, like if you try to read it on the Shonen Jump app, be warned that there are 1 or 2 chapters that are not on there due to graphic sexual content. I say graphic sexual content. It's like just more sort of than would be allowed normally. Right. So there's a few chapters you'll have to search out online, but like they're very good chapters. There's a lot of violence. Yeah, so I guess thank you very much for listening. I'm glad that we were able to kind of have this talk. I'm glad that my bullying paid off. Do you think you'll keep reading?
I do, yeah. I think I will. I'll finish this. It's really attractive that it is 97 chapters, which is kind of short for a manga of this nature, and that's quite attractive to me. But no, I'm definitely enjoying it enough just to keep going with it. I would actually like to do probably this again, but with something else. I mean,
I really enjoy that.
The Shonen Amp is a steal.
Yeah,
in terms of,
is it $1.99, $2.99 a month?
$2.99 a month, I think. And people talking about like Comixology's recent mess up. And,
yes.
You can get Marvel Unlimited in the UK, but you can't get the DC version. You can't get the Comixology Unlimited version, or at least what it was. The Kindle Unlimited version is kind of poop. So the Shonen one at the moment
is one of the best.
Oh, value for money is it's
there.
Through the roof.
It's got a lot of it. Oh, it's got a lot of problems. There's a lot of stuff you can't get on there. That like, if you want to read Hunter x Hunter, for example, that's not available because they will only sell you the volumes. So yeah, but otherwise, there's a lot of very good stuff on there. And I would highly recommend it for things like Chainsaw Man. I believe Fire Punch is on there, amongst a whole ton of other stuff. Like, so yeah, like, would you be maybe interested, like, saying, maybe once you've finished this, we do a quick spoiler cast. We get back together and do a quick spoiler cast. And talk about your feelings on how it ends.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. We can come
because I think you'll really, really enjoy it.
For sure, yeah. We'll come back and we'll cap that off, as you say, with a bit of a spoiler cast one.
Brilliant.
Sounds
all right then. So thank you very much, Will, for like I say, giving into bullying, showing that peer pressure works.
It does. It
and
wins out
for joining me to talk about one of my favorite recent manga, and probably going to be one of my favorite recent anime. I don't watch many like anime that come out seasonally. Ranking of Kings has been like the exception for the past like while now, and I may bully you to watch that at some point and get you on for that. But yeah. Like I say, thank you for joining me, and thank you for joining us here on Bigger Than Capes, and we'll see you again soon.
Soonish.
Yep. There we go.
Bye all.